Good day, everyone. My name is Eliazar, and you are watching Lego Academy. Now, it's been a while since I did my videos. I had a lot of things that I was working on, but now we are back with full steam. Now, welcome to another episode of my Python programming series. In our last tutorial, we started Python tkinter, and we said that the Python tkinter is a module that allows us to create graphical user interfaces. That was what we talked about. And we did a few examples whereby we looked at some widgets. So we basically said that we are trying to create window screens or graphical user interfaces. And we said that graphical user interfaces comprise of window screens with widgets on them. And we looked at a few examples of which were the button widget, the label widget, the radio button project, and the check button project. So today we want to continue from where we left off. Now we'll be doing this time around we're going to fully focus on our project so that we can be able to achieve our objectives. So our objectives for this entire tutorial series is to be able to create graphical user interfaces that can be connected to a database management system, both offline, that is a local server, and an online server. So without further ado, let us start. All right, so there's a modus operandi method of operation at which I normally use to um, do my tutorials. So we're going to start off with the canvas widget in Python. So what is the canvas widget? So the canvas widget, as the name implies, is a widget that allows us to create a canvas that is a background where we can actually sketch or draw on. So I'm going to be looking at two two ways of creating a canvas widget whereby we will create a canvas widget that allows us to place shapes on it, and then we will create a canvas widget that allows us to sketch, and then subsequently we will look at a combo box, and after that we will look at the text widget. So the text widget is like an entry widget. I will still explain, and then we will also look at an entry widget. All right, so without making much of a noise, let's just get started. So the first thing I want to do is I'm sure we can still remember, if you have not been following my tutorials, please go back to my previous videos and you would see the steps on how you can get started with PyCharm. So in order to refresh before we kick off, PyCharm is an integrated development environment that allows us to be able to write Python code effectively and efficiently. So it allows us to write code and execute our code in the same environment. So this was where I left off. I created a folder, a project, and I created many Python files within this project. So I will right click on my folder, and I will come to new, and I will click on Python file, which will allow me to enter the name of my file. I will say canvas project. All right, so the first thing you want to do, as always, is to import tkinter. That's the first thing. You say import tkinter, which is actually a Python file. So we say modules are Python files that allows us that have classes in them, and they have code functions in them. So they enable us, the tkinter module enables us to be able to create widgets and window screens. So I will create a variable that is going to represent the window screen that I'm going to develop. Now, just as a refresher for us, when I say a GUI, a graphical user interface, and I said that it comprises of a window screen with widgets on it, your PyCharm integrated environment is actually a GUI. So it's a graphical user interface in the sense that you see that it is square in shape or rectangle in shape with all sides not being equal. You can actually reshape it to have equal sides. But this is a GUI, and all these things, clickable or non-clickable, are icons or widgets. Now the TK class is the class in Python that allows us to create a window screen. Now inside this class, we have some functions that allow us to perform different operations, one of which is title. So the title will allow us to create a title at the top of our window screen, kind of similar to what we have here, variables and simple data types. So similar to that, you come down here and say win.geometry. So this function allows us to determine the size of our window screen. That's what it does. Now after that, I want to be able to create the canvas widget. So the canvas widget, I will give it an instance. So for those of us who can't remember what an instance is, go to my previous code, my previous videos to be able to see what it is. So an instance is just a representation of a class, a variable. It's just like a variable that you are going to assign a value to. But in this case, the value being assigned to that variable will be the class. So I will say win because I'm trying to specify that this canvas widget is on my window screen, and I will give it a width. So I'll make sure that it has the same width as the window screen and the same height as the window screen as well. I'll give it a background color of red. Doesn't really matter though. After that, I want to be able to create a line on this canvas. So we are actually creating the shapes on the canvas widget. So now you just say canvas. Now, since it's a class, obviously classes have functions in them. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is to create a line. So I'll give it an origin. So let's say I'm starting at 50 and I'm also starting at 50 also on the y-axis. So this 50, 50 represents my origin on both the x and the y-axis. And then the distance covered from that 50, I want to specify that I'm going to cover to 150, that is 100 in length. And then the distance of my y. So the y will still be on the same line as the origin. Now come here and say fill. So fill allows us to determine the color of the line. So I will say blue. Now I want to create an oval. So create oval or create arc. So let's create an arc first. So an arc is just an angle at a point. So you can decide to reduce the angle, that is, you can allow it not to get to 360, it can stop at 270, 180, whichever distance you want it to stop at. But it's going to start at 50 and it's going to be a bit lower here on the y-axis. So from what I said when we started our graphical user interfaces, I said that unlike science subjects whereby your origin of your graph start at is a right angle triangle that starts at your bottom left. But in the case of GUI programming in Python, your origin will start at your top left. Okay, so 50, you can take it a bit down at 100, and then you can. So I have to specify how wide it's going to be. So starting at 50, extending up to 150, the same width, and then since it started at 100, extending it downwards, I will just say 200. And I'll give it a color of green. So I will just give them different colors, and then I will create another. I will use another function to create something else. So I will create an oval rather, and they will all be on the same 50. Now this one will have to be on a different y. So now, since I started at 100 and I'm extending down to 200, it simply means that this one is going to cover, that is from 100 down to 200 as 300. So I can start from 300, or let me just say 350. So I will say I'm starting from 350 on the y-axis, and from that 50, I'm extending 150 again, and from that 350, since I'm trying to extend 100, that is going to be 450. Now give it a color of yellow. So these are the colors I have. Now I can come here and say win dot main loop, So I'm trying to show the shape. You just click on the drop down and say current file, click on play, and you see that I have my, okay, we haven't yet packed the canvas. So before you can run your main loop, you have to pack your canvas. So I'll say canvas.pack. Now we said geometry managers are the ones that allow us to make sure that a shape is actually complete on the window screen. So I didn't even give it an extent. So I did not give it an extent. So my arc needs to have an extent. So the extent at which it extends. So extent. I will just give it maybe 270. 270. So let's see. So you can see that it's not a complete circle. But this one is so far down. So let's see the reason why that is as our oval. So I started at X, started at Y, 100 on the Y axis. Then this one was at, so if this one extends down to, starting from 100 down to 200. Okay. It means it takes 100 actually. That's what it means. So it takes 100. So this one, so that's just 200 actually, not necessarily. So I'll just say 250. Let's say 250. Let's see how it's going to be. Okay. Okay. So I'll have to adjust the height of this. So if this is 250, it means that adding 100 to this, that will make it 350 so that it can be a complete circle. And you can see, voila, we have our circle. So that's how you can create a canvas. Now, what of if we're trying to draw on a canvas? So let's quickly do that. Without wasting much time. So I will just say canvas draw, canvas draw project, canvas draw project. So the same thing, without wasting much time, you want to import tkinter as the first thing you want to do. Create a window screen for yourself, and you import the class, the tk class. You say win.title, give it a title. You can now say canvas drawing widget. Then you can come here, give it a geometry, and I'll just give it 350 by 400, and then after that you can now come here, create your canvas again, canvas class, an instance for the class, say canvas, and then you specify that it's on the window screen, and after that you want to give it a width. I'll just give it the same 350, then a height of 400. After that, I'll give it a background of blue. It means I'm trying to draw on the blue background. Now after that, I want to create a function that allows me to draw line. So I will just say draw, and I can just say value. That's what I'll say. So value. So now what am I trying to do here? I want to be able to draw lines. So I'll just create an x1, a y1, an x2, a y2, an x2, y2. So x1, y1, then x2, y2, and after that, just do canvas dot create line. Say create line. No, not yet. Anyway, not yet. So what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to be able to create points, just similar to what I did here, whereby I created x-axis values for my x-axis and my y-axis, so my x1, y1, x2, y2. So that is exactly what I'm trying to do here. So after that, I'll come here and I'll say dot value dot x minus 2. Why am I doing this? So now, when you do something like this, normally the x and y axis can already be identified. But in order to identify your x and y axis, you will need to be able to create a variable in the parentheses of a function and use that variable to identify your x and y axis. It's just something we do in graphical user interfaces. Now, a binding function in Python is a function that allows us to be able to use our mouse, or it allows us to be able to identify keystrokes such as mouse events or keyboard events, which allows us to be able to execute programs. So binding functions are, they allow us to identify keystrokes such as mouse or keyboard events, which in turn allow us to be able to execute programs. So that's what binding functions are. So I will still explain much on that, but here we're just trying to draw. So what I'm trying to do is that I want to be able to left click on my mouse in order to make lines, strokes. So I'm trying to be able to get my X and Y axis. And in order to do that, I need to create a variable in the parentheses of this function and then use that variable to identify the X and Y axis. Now, this 2 simply means the thickness of the brush. It means the thickness of the brush, and this negative sign that we are seeing here represents the origin of my X. Now I will create another, I'll call the same value parameter in the parentheses of my function and say y minus 2, and I'll call the same parameter, I'll say value.x plus 2, and I'll call the same parameter, I will say value.y plus 2. Now what did I do here? This value.x minus 2, this negative sign just represents the origin of my x-axis, where I'm starting from before I start to move my hands across my mouse in order to make strokes or lines. And then this negative 2 means the origin of my mouse on the y-axis before I start to make movements with my mouse to create strokes. And then this plus 2, the reason why plus is here is because now after I've started, that is my origin of my x and y, as I start to move across my mouse on my canvas, the distance covered, that is what this negative symbol represents. And of course, the 2 represents the thickness of the brush. So I want consistency regardless of how I move my mouse. I want consistency. So now this variable, this value.x minus 2 is going to be assigned to x1, value.y minus 2 is going to be assigned to y1, value.x plus 2 is going to be assigned to x2, like that. So I'm assigning multiple values on a straight line. So I am assigning multiple values to multiple variables on a straight line. And after that, I will now call that my canvas and call my create line, and I will pass my x1, y1, x2, y2 to it. And after that, I'm going to come outside of the function and I'm going to call my binding functions. I'll say dot bind. Now, we have different types of binding functions. Now, what I'm going to work with now is the B1 motion. Now, when we say, now there are different types of binding functions, which I will still talk about in later tutorials. But a binding function, like I said, it allows us to be able to detect events such as the clicking of your mouse or the clicking of your keyboard, which in turn allow us or enable us to execute programs such as calling a function or just performing something when they are triggered. So this was how game development was back in the day before we started having frameworks and you understand, before we started having frameworks or engines or game engines. So this is exactly what was being used then. So what I will just do is just to come here and pass the function that I'm trying to use this binding function to call or to trigger. So I'll just call my draw function. And when you are trying to call a function using a binding function, you do not attach the parentheses of that function to it. Now, B1 motion simply represents when I left click and I move my hand across the mouse while still holding the button down. So as I left click, I want to hold it down and then move my hand across the mouse. That's why it's called B1 motion. But if I want to be able to identify my left click, I'm going to pass button 1 for that. So button 1 represents left clicking. Button 2 is when you click the middle button on your mouse. For those of us that have an extensible mouse, then button 3 is when you right click. So all these will be made apparent later. But let me just finish up this project. After that, I want to pack the widget and I want to display my window screen. So the main loop. Let's see how we can do what we're expected to do. So if I should left click and move my hand across the mouse, you see that I'm making strokes. Okay, let me make it a bit brighter. Let me change the color. So I'll come here and say fill. So fill, I'll give it a bright color. Let me just say red. Let me just increase the thickness a bit of the mouse. So 3, 3, 3. So you can see that it's a bit thick. So this is how you can be able to sketch on the canvas widget. All right, so that is how you do that. Now, I hope it was clear. Now, in order for us to carry out the next one is your Combobox widget. So Combobox just allows us to create a widget that allows us to that has a drop down such that when you click on it, you have so many options to choose from. So it's a widget that has a drop down that once that drop down is clicked, you have so many options to choose from. So the name of my project is going to be Combobox widget. So let's see how we can do that. So as usual, you want to import tkinter. You want to create a window screen, tkinter.tk, and after that you want to get the title so that it will be displayed at the top. So I will just say Combobox widget, and after that you can give it a geometry, and then you can just say 300 by 450. Now, having done this, I want to be able to create a label. I will create a label at the top that allows me to display some text titling my widget as a Combobox widget. Or I can just call it days of the week. So, days of week is going to be a label widget showing us the days of the week, like titling it that, giving it a title of that. So I will just come here and say text days of the week. Now you can decide to give it a font. Font just means just like your Times New Roman, your Arial, and the likes. So I will give it a font, say days of week dot pack. So that is that. Now I want to create my combo box. I will just call it days. Now there is a module, a sub module inside my tkinter module. So I will just come here and say from tkinter import ttk. So the combo box is inside the ttk module. I will just say combo box. So a module is basically a Python file that has code in it. You say win, you can decide to. So I will just leave it like that. I will say font. I'll give it some font, and I'll say Arial. So I'll make all of them almost have, or I will make them have the same fonts. Now, before I pack my combo box, I want to start adding values to it. Now, the way you can add values to a combo box is to open up the square bracket beside it and say equal to, then you can start listing all the days of the week. So the first day is a Sunday, second day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Alright, so after that, you want to now specify that. Now there's a function inside the combo box class that allows us to specify the index position of the first element that we want to be displayed. Now, you can decide to display any element, but if you can remember from our previous tutorials, When we have a list, the very first element is at the 0 index, and the next element is at the 1 index, 2 index, 3 index, 4 index, like that till the last element. So I want a situation whereby when I run the code, it shows Sunday for me. And after that, I can now pack my combo box. So I will pack it after. And after that, I want to create a button. But before I create a button, I want to be able to create a function that allows me to retrieve values or retrieve a value from this combo box, such that when I click on the button, it displays, when I click on the button, it displays the text selected from the combo box on another label widget. So I will just call the function reveal, and before that I'm going to create a label widget and I'll call it display so that I can display some text once I have clicked on the button. So I'll say tkinter.label. Now I'm not going to pass any text initially, the label. I will just leave it like that. I will leave it like that, and I will not pack it yet. But after the button has been clicked, I want to display some text on this label widget. So I'm going to place the label widget below the button widget. So I will come here and say text, or I'll just say message. Then I can just write some text. Today is now. There's a function called get that we use to retrieve values from widgets uh, in the graphical user interface. So any widget at all, we use the get function to retrieve values from that widget. Now we have a class called the str class that allows us to be able to make sure that text or values are displayed on our window screen. Now, if I retrieve a value from a widget, that value cannot be displayed on my window screen yet until I convert it to a text. So if you want to see anything textual or in a text form on the window screen, you want to be able to convert that thing first of all to a string, to be of the string class. So that is what I'm trying to do. I'll come here and say days.get, so I can retrieve that value and display it on my window screen. So I'll come here and say display.config. Now config is a function that allows us to display some text on a window screen if we did not display that text on that it allows us to display some text on a widget if text was not originally displayed on that widget before. So that's what the config is used for. I'll come here and say tkinter dot button window. I'm going to give some text. I'll call it reveal or show, and after that I'll give it a font, the Arial 30, and I'll just come here. So I'm going to now give it a command. So now the command option allows us to pass a function to a button widget such that when that button widget is clicked, the button widget calls that function. So I'll still be explaining some concepts to you later, but let us just quickly do this project down. So after that, I'm going to pack it so that it can be displayed. And after I've packed it, that label widget that I created initially, I'm also going to come here and pack it below the button. And after that, I'm going to call my main loop. Let's see what we are trying to do here. Let's see that. Now you can see that, okay, let me try to make it a bit wider than the way it is already. Let us try to run. So now if I click on show, you see that I get today is Sunday. Click on the drop down, change it to another day. All right, so I think there was a mistake there in my code. Wednesday, there's a comma here. Let's run that again. Click on the drop down. All right, so you can see that we have these Combobox widget and all that too. That's basically what we were trying to develop and create. So subsequently, we're going to revisit all these again to explain intricately. All right, so the next widget we want to look at is the text widget. So the text widget, or rather the entry widget. So I'll just say entry widget. So the entry widget allows us to enter a single line of text. It's more like when you are trying to log in into an application, that single line, that field that allows you to enter some detail. You understand? So you want to import the tkinter module first of all before you can start to give it a title. Oh, I forgot. So these things I'm doing, title, you see that at the very top of the window screen, you have the title for that widget. So the Combobox widget. So that is the reason why I normally write in the parentheses of the title function. So here I'll just say entry widget. So I'll be very fast because I don't have much time. I have to quickly wrap up this video under some specific or rather under a specific time duration. So I'll give it 300 by 400 and I'll just come here. You can decide to give it some label in order to display your text or text at the top before the entry widget. And you can specify that it is on the window screen and just say entry below. You can give it some font, and give it Arial 30. And you come here and say label.pack. And after that, you can come here and say ent is equal to tkinter.entry. So the entry widget is a class that allows us to enter a single line of text and give it some font, the Arial 30. You can also pack that as well, ent.pack. So the pack is a geometry manager that allows us to ensure that a window screen is visible for us to see. It ensures that the window screen is visible. That's what the pack geometry manager does. So you can see that here I have an entry widget that allows me to enter a single line of text. So the main loop is what allows us to make sure that the window screen is displayed continuously for us. This is what allows us to, this is what gives us the ability to create that window screen. This is what makes it visible. This will be the title at the top. This is the size. This controls the size of that window screen. Now, for the last widget for today, we want to look at the text widget. So the text widget. And the text widget allows us to enter multiple lines of text. So I'll just say import tkinter. You see window is equal to tkinter.tk. And after that, you come here, you see window.title, give it title, the text widget. Come here, you see window.geometry, 300 by 400. I can also decide to give it some label, some text. I will display the text at the top, like kind of like the title. You say text is equal to text widget, and you can decide to give it some fonts. The font. And you come here and you see label.pack. And after that, you can now come here and say text is equal to tkinter.text. So the text is a widget that allows us to enter multiple lines of text on a window screen. I will give it some weight. I'll give it 20. I'll give it on height. I will give it 10. And I can give it some font. I'll give it Arial. And I'll give it a size of 20. I'll come here and say text.pack. And after that, you can decide to call your main loop. Let's see what we have. You can see I have my window screen. It's still a bit too, window screen is a bit too small. Let us just try to increase the size just a little by 50, and then the height by 50. Let's see what we have. All right, so you can see that I can enter multiple lines of text. So subsequently, I will show you how you can create a text editor similar to Notepad. So we are going to code the project from scratch. So that is all that was on my agenda today. my objectives. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial episode. So if you liked my video, if you feel like you are not following, if you did not really get what I said, and you need, or you have a bit of a problem following along with my tutorial, just leave a comment in the comment section. Or if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit that like button. Please help me to share to your friends or people who you might feel might need this information. And please subscribe to my channel. So till we meet again, it's goodbye for now.